Hello there. So in this presentation, we're going to be looking at WH Auden's poem, The Capital. This is about an unnamed capital city that seems to promise glamour, freedom, and luxury, but beneath this, there lies a darker reality. Now, to give this some context, this was written in 1940 during the Second World War. This was a time of mass manufacturing and really expanding, growing cities. And although that's all in the past now, most of us still live in cities, and many of those people who do so struggle to survive despite the apparent appeal. So before we go any further, let's have a quick listen to the poem, The Capital. Quarter of pleasures, where the rich are always waiting expensively for miracles to happen. Oh, little restaurant, where the lovers eat each other. Cafe where exiles have established a malicious village. You, with your charm and apparatus, have abolished the strictness of winter and the spring's compulsion. Far from your light, the outraged punitive father. The dullness of mere obedience here is apparent. Yet, with orchestras and glances, oh, you betray us to belief in our infinite powers. And the innocent, unobservant offender falls in a moment victim to the heart's invisible furies. In unlighted streets, you hide away the appalling. Factories where lives are made for a temporary use, like collars or chairs. Rooms where the lonely are battered slowly like pebbles into fortuitous shapes. But the sky you illumine, your glow is visible far into the dark countryside, the enormous, the frozen, where, hinting at the forbidden like a wicked uncle, night after night to the farmer's children, you beckon. Okay, now let's start to analyze this a little bit. Now, as with most poems, the title's a really good place to start. Capital obviously refers to the main city in a country, but could it refer to anything else? Well, capital can also mean money, and that seems to fit in quite well with what's described here. So first up, in this quarter or part of the city, there are signs of great wealth and hedonism. People here live an incredible life, summed up by the positive diction we can see here, such as pleasures, miracles, and lovers. There's so much to do that they even seem a little bored by all this excess. You see the repeated words there, waiting. And the people who enjoy this lifestyle are described as exiles, which tell us they've come from somewhere else to form this little community or exclusive club. They eat in fabulous restaurants, but the phrase lovers eat each other sounds more like cannibals, perhaps eating each other metaphorically through their greed and nefarious behavior. They could also be, I guess, kissing passionately, so appearing to eat each other, which would be a pretty shameless show of public affection back in the 1940s. Now, in terms of how this sounds, there are lots of soft consonants here at the beginning that reflect the luxury of this place. So check out the phrase, for example, where the rich are always waiting, lots of soft W sounds there and R's. The stanza ends with a bit of a tonal shift as Auden describes this as a malicious village. Now, although a village has connotations of a close-knit community, this one is a very select group who come together for their own selfish, hedonistic reasons. It even sounds nasty thanks to all that sibilance, as in they've established a malicious village. Now, in the second stanza, do you see who the speaker is talking to when they say you with your charm? They're talking to the city itself, giving it a human quality, possibly because the actual humans maybe seem to lack any humanity. Talking to something that can't talk back is called apostrophe. It's like when Hamlet is talking to the skull of his old friend Yorick, or when Tom Hanks' character's talking to the volleyball he's called Wilson in the film Castaway. Now here the speaker seems to be blaming the city for creating something so bad. The city is said to have apparatus, which also makes it seem quite clinical and lacking in nature. A further sign that nature is missing comes when we learn that the city has abolished the strictness of winter. So rather than the cold snow and ice, the city's human-made electricity keeps everyone warm with its unnatural lighting. And to emphasize something, it's always good to provide a contrast, and that's what comes next. So far away from all of this is the punitive father and the hard work on the farms where everyone has to be obedient in order to survive. And this dull lifestyle is in sharp contrast to the bright lights and temptation of the city. So in the third stanza, Auden continues the idea of the city as a character who's tricking everyone. The sounds of the orchestra are usually only for those with money, and those with capital tend to receive flattering glances from others. The speaker admits here, though, that all of this is really a lie. The city folk are fooled into thinking they have infinite powers. This hyperbole or exaggeration is used to evoke a sense of pity as people become victims to this greed. The phrase innocent, unobservant offenders is worth pausing on. Let's think about that. The word innocent is part of the enjambment that makes us wait for a second and consider the people who arrive from rural parts who are naive. However, they're willingly drawn to this world of false promises and so are then called offenders in the next line, which creates an interesting juxtaposition between those two words. So moving on, we now shift our focus from those who have to those who have not. Away from the bright lights, a symbol of luxury and high society living, the city hides its darker, appalling secrets. With reference to industry, the speaker highlights factory workers here, you can see in the photo, who are disposable and replaceable as much as an everyday object. Their lives are temporary, similar to a chair or a collar, which may sound confusing, but years ago collars could be removed and unclipped from a shirt, so this image may seem a little strange at first. Workers here pound away at making things for the factory owner. They pound away at things so much they become like pebbles themselves, which are, of course, made from larger rocks, being ground down and eroded over time. The sound of this stanza also contrasts with what's gone before. The softer sounds from earlier on are now replaced with hard consonants, such as collars, battered, and pebbles. And then as we move into the final stanza, we see the spread of the city and its impact on everything around it. Up to now, there's been a distinct distance between the city and the country, but here the city's lights reach out, almost beckoning and calling those to come to it. Its glow, which has connotations of warmth and comfort, again contrasts with the dark and frozen countryside. And parallelism here is used to emphasize how big this place is, which we can see in the phrase, the dark countryside, the enormous, the frozen. Now, Auden uses an interesting simile at the end, comparing the city to a wicked uncle. So rather than using apostrophe, he's now using personification to bring the city to life. The wicked uncle makes us think of a fairy tale, maybe, where someone we initially trust turns out to be the bad guy. Now, that seems a pretty good way of describing the city, which at first appeals to everyone because of its lavish lifestyle and fun, but only when it's too late do we realise the darker truths. Now, move on a little bit to talk about theme and symbols here. Now, clearly the main theme is the harsh reality of life in the cities, along with the false promises of urban living. Although the city promises charm and a better future for those drawn to its bright, glowing lights, the reality is different. It's a place where the rich may prosper and get richer, but they do this by taking advantage of those below them. If you are rich, you have it easy. You can wait and wait for things to do. It really would seem like a miracle if you had this lifestyle. But despite this, they also seem lazy and bored, as they have basically too much of a good thing. Hidden away from them, although controlled by them, are the poor. They're treated as objects who can be used until they're useless and then just discarded for someone new, much like pebbles who are ground down into something small and surrounded by thousands of other small, anonymous pebbles. The city ultimately appears to be an uncaring place that rewards those at the top and doesn't care about those at the bottom. And as we mentioned before, the bright lights are mentioned often and symbolize the attraction and lure of the city, but they are artificial and misleading apparatus that tempts the youth from the dark and unlit farms. It's really the city that is dark in the sense that it's home to poverty, cruelty, and broken dreams. And then finally, the structure of the poem. The poem has a fairly regular shape to it. However, within it, things get a bit messy. We have 5 quatrains, or 4-line stanzas, but there's no rhyme scheme and a strange kind of meter. So why does Auden do this? I think in order to make things seem hectic and chaotic, but also within some kind of shape. So there is some kind of rhythm and meter, it's just not where you think it will be. So rather than following an iambic rhythm, like a heartbeat, the da-dum, 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 there are 5 beats to a line, but they're not in any order. In the line, "O little restaurant where the lovers eat each other," we can see this well. That means there's an attractive and easy pace to each line, but it feels uneven and not really what we expect, much like living in this city. And look at how each line ends. It's nearly always on a down note or an unstressed syllable, like waiting, other, beckon. For a poem that's really supposed to be on the surface about luxury and fun, you may expect a rhyme scheme that skips along, but no, here there's none, which reflects more the reality of this ominous place. So overall, we have a poem about how city life may seem cool and enticing, and indeed for the fortunate few, it may be for a while, but for those who are drawn there, it's a bleak, depressing facade where people are used up and then discarded. So there we go. Hope you found that useful. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe.